Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz, and today is a solo episode of the podcast where I'm diving into an excellent book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, subtitle, Achieving Your Wildly Important Goals. This book is by Chris McChesney, Covey, and Jim Huling, because we want to think about execution over expectations, and we want to be able to instill and install this habit and this mindset of discipline into our lives so we can do the things we know we need to even when we don't feel like it. So discipline and execution are huge mindsets and habits to achieving those wildly important goals, which is the subtitle of this book. And so here's just a quick overview of the 4 disciplines. You have discipline 1, focus on the wildly important. Basically, the more you try to do, the less you actually accomplish. This is a stark, inescapable principle that we all have to live with. That's discipline 1, focus on the wildly important. Now, throughout this episode, they refer to it as wildly important goals. I prefer to refer to it as wildly important targets. Now, I've explained in a bunch of previous episodes why I like the distinction between goals and targets, because targets, I feel I'm aiming in that direction because I don't fully have control over what happens when I'm headed towards my goal. I know that my direction is more important than my speed. And so I want to have a very clear, crystal clear target that's really important to me. And I know I'm pushing everything, daily actions, movements in that direction. So you may hear me throughout this episode interchange goals for targets. Just know that in the actual book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, they say wildly important goal. I may say wildly important target, but it's virtually interchangeable. Whatever just really more resonates with you when you're trying to do this and execute to the best of your ability and become the best version of yourself. So you have that discipline 1, which is focused on the wildly important. Then you have discipline number 2, which is act on lead measures. This is the discipline of leverage. It's based on the simple principle that not all actions are created equal. Some actions have more impact than others when reaching for your goal or target. And it is those you want to identify and act on if you want to actually reach your goal or become the best version of yourself or do whatever is firing you up. And then discipline number 3 is you want to keep a compelling scoreboard. So people play differently when they're keeping score, right? If you really doubt this, watch any group of teenagers playing basketball and see how the game changes the minute the score is being kept. See how much quicker they move, more intensity, they play with, because there's a compelling scoreboard for these young people to try and win this game. And so we want to keep a compelling scoreboard. Remember, this is just a quick overview, and then we're going to dive deeper into each one here in a second. And then you have discipline number 4, which is create a cadence of accountability. Discipline 4 is where your execution really happens. The first 3 disciplines set up the game, but until you apply discipline 4, your team or yourself or your organization or your family isn't in the game. And so you have discipline number 4, which is create a cadence of accountability. Like I said, those are the 4 disciplines of execution. Now, I highly encourage you to actually read this book, but you can get a lot out of this episode just by following some of these disciplines and executing on the things that they talk about here that are super important. And so those are the 4 disciplines of execution. Now let's take a little bit deeper look at each one. So again, we have discipline number 1. We need to focus on our wildly important goal or target. In the book, they call it a WIG, a wildly important goal, wildly important target. The more you try, the less you actually accomplish. Execution should be aimed at a small number of wildly important targets. This simplicity will help you focus, will help any team focus, any family focus, or any organization's energy focus to a sufficient intensity that will ignite actual progress and eventually lead you in the path towards getting some of those results that you want. Because we know, again, direction is more important than speed. But if you have a wildly important target or a wildly important goal, you may be able to maximize intensity and energy while also going in the right direction if you actually focus on the things that matter most. That's why you need to identify the sort of wildly important goal or target. So for any individual focused on deep work, the implication is that you should identify a small number of ambitious outcomes to pursue with your deep work hours, right? So many of us just do shallow, distracted, multitasking work, right? But Cal Newport tells us, right, we want to get into deep work, right? But what can you do in those bits of deep work? What's actually going deep? Have you identified the wildly important goals that are actually going to move the needle forward? The general urging to spend more time working deeply doesn't spark a lot of enthusiasm, right? Because it's hard, and so people aren't really fired up about it. And so there's a 2014 column titled The Art of Focus, where David Brooks endorsed this approach of letting ambitious goals drive focused behavior. He explained, if you want to win the war of attention, don't try to say no to the trivial distractions you find on the information smorgasbord. That's a great word. Try to say yes. Here it is. Try to say yes to the subject that arouses a terrifying longing, and let that terrifying longing crowd out everything else. So if you have, what he's saying, if you have that wildly important goal or target, it's much easier to say no to the distractions because you've already said yes to this thing that freaking lights your soul on fire. And so you know you can get deep with that, and that's your ambitious goal, that's your direction, and then you're sufficiently putting this energy into those couple wildly important goals, or that one wildly important goal, or whatever it is for you, your team, your organization, your family, whatever domain you're trying to be excellent in and execute at the highest level. So step number one also includes what's wildly important to you. What's wildly important to you? Like freaking jumbo, huge, really important. We need to start there, say yes to it, then say no to all the other distractions. All right, by the way, Sean Covey, who is a co-author of this book, his dad wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so Sean Covey's dad, Stephen, puts it this way in the 7 Habits. So all these things line up in terms of all the books that have been written about this. They're just really mostly said in just a different way, which hopefully resonate with more people. You have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly, smilingly and unapologetically, to say no to other things. And the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. The enemy of the best is often the good. So again, answer this question: what's wildly important to you? Then we move on to discipline number 2. We need to act on lead measures. Lead measures. Yes, lead measures. We'll talk more about it in a moment, but for now, know this. Your wildly important goal is a lag measure. It lags behind the other things that you do. It's the result, it's the byproduct of doing a bunch of things, of doing a bunch of things right. Your lead measure is the number one thing you need to actually do to create the momentum and the progress and potentially results that you want. So the lead measures are your daily actions, habits, and process. The lead measures are where you have the most control. Like I said, that's why I like wildly important target, because that's the lag measure. That's where we're trying to aim, and we don't have a ton of control over how or over when we get there, or if we ever do, but we do have a ton of control over the lead measures, over the daily actions, habits, and our process of inching us closer to that wildly important target. And again, the lag measure is generally a byproduct of the work we put in on a day-to-day basis. That's why it's about discipline and execution. If you have the discipline to execute every single day, you're going to leap over execution. You're going to have execution over expectations, and you're going to have great lead measures that track you closer to that lag measure. So most people create a goal, right, or a target or a lag measure, and they spend all of their time looking at their stats to see if they hit it. The best executors, the best producers, however, create their wildly important goal, then spend all of their time measuring whether or not they're crushing the lead measure stuff that will make the actual result, right? That will actually lead to the result, but make it like the lead measures are making the lag measure just look like a byproduct of their work. Right? They're deliberately focusing on those lead measures, which really is just another word for deliberately focusing on our process, our day-to-day process of what's inside of our control, our actions, our habits, our energy, our focus, our fundamentals. Like those are the things that are actually going to lead you closer to your lag measure. So really that lag or that WIG, that wildly important goal, just becomes a byproduct. And again, because the lead measure is where you have the most control, you want your full focus should be driving you in the direction of your WIG, right? And so the lead measure is where you have the most control, and they're driving you closer and closer and closer to your wildly important goal. But you're not just focused on that goal only, right? Because that's outcome, and that sort of constricts us from really being our best selves on a day-to-day basis. That's why we want to focus more on the lead measures, which are in our control, which are actually going to drive our progress and lead us closer to that wildly important goal. So again, what's your wildly important goal? What is it? What is your wildly important goal? Maybe you need to pause here and write it out and figure it out, or need to do some stuff to work through it. I'll link some episodes below that talk a lot about confidence and habits, and they'll help you discover your wildly important goal or your massive transformative purpose, which then you can refer back to this episode and dive deeper into these 4 disciplines, which can help you create real progress and real momentum on that wildly important goal. And then once you have that wildly important goal, what's the number one thing you need to do to hit it? What are the lead measures, the daily actions that you need to do, that you need to have discipline over, that are going to get you closer to that wildly important goal? That's the important stuff right there. And so then we have, what is that? Yeah, that leads us to discipline number 3, right? We need to keep a compelling scoreboard of our lead measure. We have to have fun, a compelling way to know at a glance whether or not we're on track, right? Compelling scoreboard, not solely focusing on the result or the outcome or getting there, but focusing on a compelling way to keep score about how I'm doing on the actual lead measures, which I have control over, right? Celebrating those small wins, acknowledging those movements, having a way to look at a glance, check my process. My process is good. Go from there. I didn't make as much progress as I wanted today. Okay, so my process needs to be tweaked a little bit. My lead measures need to be tweaked a little bit because I need to move it a little bit closer to my lag measure or my wildly important goal. So having a compelling scoreboard is important, but the scoreboard doesn't mean I'm solely only focused on results, because again, that constricts us. Right? We want to have that outcome. We want to have that North Star. We want to have that wildly important goal, but then probably, forget about it, because then we want to focus on what's actually going to get us there, which is the lead measures, which is the daily actions, which is the habits, which is the process. And that's what we want to keep a scoreboard of, whether or not we're doing that right, and how can we tweak that along the way, adjust it along the way, so we know that we're moving in the right direction. And so, then discipline number 4, we need to create a cadence of accountability. We need to create a cadence of accountability. In other words, we need to make sure we're regularly checking in on how we're doing with the whole process, right? I just stated that, so we're just trying to reiterate that with this cadence of accountability. We can set the system up and then walk away. We can't set the system up and then walk away. The system requires us to stay on top of it. That's the daily process, the daily actions. We need to be accountable to the lead measures if we want to, 1, enjoy the process, which is very important, and 2, ensure a strong likelihood of high-fiving ourselves as we achieve our WIG or lag measure, right? So we set up the system, we can't just forget about it. The system is something we tweak and adjust and look at every single day, because we have to stay on top of it, because the lead measures, again, I know I said this a lot, the lead measures are what's actually moving us forward in whatever we're trying to do. So that's the 4 disciplines of execution in a nutshell. So let's go over them one more time. We have discipline 1, Focus on the wildly important. Discipline 2, act on lead measures. Discipline 3, keep a compelling scoreboard. And discipline 4, create a cadence of accountability. That, again, is the 4 disciplines of execution in a nutshell. And so to wrap us up, let me say this. Please say, I don't care. I don't care to all the trivial stuff most people think they need to be masters of. Take a sword to the trivial. Say it with me now, I don't care. Peter Drucker, who spent decades studying human behavior within organizations, observed this. I've seen many great people who are magnificent at getting the unimportant things done. They have an impressive record of achievement on trivial matters. Yikes. Yikes. It's time for an inventory, to look deep. What unimportant things need to go from your life? Let's just nudge them out with a deep, courageous yes to the wildly important goals that just lights our soul on fire. Get those unimportant, trivial things out, nudge them out because we're so fired up and courageously saying yes to our wildly important targets. And let's demonstrate that yes with consistent, effective action on the things that truly matter so we can actualize our potential in greatest service to the world. Thank you for your time and attention. If you found this episode useful or valuable at all, please share it with a friend. That's the absolute best marketing tool that we have. But other than that, I appreciate you and I love you, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.